Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our second roundup panel of the day. We're going to be talking about Milan. It's kind of impossible though to talk about a specific city when discussing this season, because it was such a season of change and such a season of sort of broader debate about what's happening in fashion, and also just like a plain sort of really weird season because so many people weren't showing, and that I think was particularly prominent in Milan. Charlie Porter in the FT talked about how there was basically only 3 shows to see. It was like Gucci, Versace and Prada, which isn't completely, I think he was obviously making a bit of a generalisation, but I do think it felt like a really odd season. And the clothes we were seeing, it felt like it was much more about these kind of cluttered, eccentric worlds than it was about like a seasonal statement. So there's really weird time for fashion. But before we kind of dive into our discussions, I will let my fabulous set of panellists, starting with you, Dom, introduce themselves.
My name is Dominic Jones. I'm a consultant creative director specialising in jewellery.
I'm Nick Carvell. I'm the associate style editor at British GQ.
Hi, I'm Abzal. I'm a menswear designer. I'm a recent graduate of MA Fashion at St. Martin's.
I'm Stavros Karelis and I'm the founder and buying director of Machine A.
So, to jump straight into that discussion, I don't think I was the only one that thought it was a weird season. It feels like it's like, we were just saying before we went live, like everyone's changing creative directors, everyone's reconsidering how they show, whether they're going to be doing buy now, see now, or like showing men's and women's together, and showing less clothes, not showing, etc, etc. Why is that happening? What do we think will happen, and what's the answer? And is it a good thing? And I wanted to ask you about this, Tom, because we've spoken a lot on the panels about like the system not being ethically sustainable. It's not sustainable in terms of like consumption. It's not sustainable in terms of its treatment of designers. Do you see what's happening at the moment as like a vaguely positive thing, or do you think it's actually getting worse and we're getting more impatient? Big question, sorry. I was like, big fashion for me.
Yeah. I think it's great that individual designers are taking back control in lots of different areas. I think the pace of, but equally that's splitting into 2 ways, where it's becoming even faster, even more instant, which I think in terms of the longevity of fashion is negative, because it kind of breeds this kind of like 2-tier system where the bigger, older establishment will be able to grow at a pace that innovative and younger and smaller brands won't be able to.
That's interesting.
But equally, I feel like that kind of element is kind of reacting and taking control and presenting in different ways and in different formats. So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out as a cohesive message for the whole of the fashion industry, but it's definitely a time of flux, and I definitely, I feel like it is just working out in its own ways and forms.
It'll all shake down, I do agree with you that the biggest concern, and it's always been the way, is for young designers, and I think they're under more pressure than ever. Do you feel like as a graduate of St. Martin's, is that the kind of conversations people have?
I have lots of friends actually all year, have maybe 5 people are starting their own brand, and you can see the pressure on them, because some event managers show during the couture week, and like they figuring out, but actually it's also a time of opportunity. You thinking like, oh, why do I have to follow the system? Maybe the system should follow me in a sense. But again, like there is a support, and especially like in London, there's always support, like New Gen and stuff. But designers really trying out. Like someone actually opting out from the shows.
Really?
Yeah, I have people who just started with private orders first.
Yeah, that's interesting.
For the first 2 seasons, and then maybe they will continue doing like ready to wear.
So even taking more of like a couture approach, they're actually going.
It's quite interesting. I think it's because of this kind of chaos in the fashion system. People like really don't like trying to find their own way, rather than like following the system. I think it's quite interesting. I think it's an exciting time for.
But
fashion.
you're going.
I'm gonna work. Yeah.
You're like good for them, not for me.
Not for me. I'm gonna go work. Yeah.
That's so funny.
No, but I really applaud all the designers who like really have the guts to start their own label. Also, it's like financial, like it's from the finance side. I don't know. It's sometimes
it's
terrifying.
Yeah. What's your take on it, Steps? Because you work a lot with young designers.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what just has been said about young designers. Is very, very difficult and very, very challenging to even enter the kind of whole arena of dealing with buyers, dealing with stores, press, shows, presentations, everything. It needs a lot of system support and support around you from right people, to be able to do it yourself. Now, although I try to be not that pessimistic, because I think that the system defines itself and changes as we progress. So it's not as perhaps as dramatic as sometimes it sounds, because I think that even the big brands facing their own challenges. It's not everything is perfect in their own world, because and that's why I think that you see lots of the really big established brands try to imitate in a way, the way that young emerging brands presenting themselves. So things like presentations, shows, installations, limited edition collections, collaborations that big brands would never think about doing, perhaps 5 or 8 years ago. It's such a big thing to everyone. So I think that in a sense, they not in a sense, in a major sense, we need young emerging designers. So I think that the system is going to keep supporting them, but perhaps everyone has to understand that they're not rules for success, and there's no any specific guidelines that if you follow them you're going to be successful. So everyone has to follow their own path, be sure what they take on board and what they can handle with that, and I think it would work fine in the end.
It's interesting that you talk about we all need young designers, because the concern, I guess, is that young designers become nothing more than kind of an ideas factory, and then they don't actually they set trends and they start they test things out, and then other bigger brands pick up on them, and actually the financial reward never goes to the original designer, that young brand. It goes to, and I think that's quite scary when you feel often young designers, and it's always relevant that in Milan, because Milan has such a lack of young designers.
Yeah, always.
So much, completely. But then you often, and particularly because of the new Gucci, with Alessandro Michele, now Milan does feel very much part of the conversation, but you worry that it feels a part of the fashion conversation. It feels so relevant, kind of because of the work of lots of young designers who've set the pace and tried things out, and they've made this kind of different trends that are now being picked up on. I don't think that's necessarily the case with Gucci, because I think it is very much Alessandro Michele's world. But I do see that across the rest of Milan, where you feel this is so in step with the times, but who started those times? It's a weird one.
100%, but then at the same time, this season particularly, you have Pitti that did something really amazing, and it's not just this season, but for the main 2 evenings, 2 nights, one you had a major brand, Raf Simons, showing there. The second night you had Gosha Rubczynski, which of course, everyone knows who Gosha is, and everyone, it's a super successful brand, but at the same time it's still considered to be one of the young designers that are doing things within the fashion. So Pitti tries to bring some young emerging designers and give them the platform to present a few shows. I mean, last season I think was Junjay, they're picking up someone Tigran showed once. Tigran did, and I know that there are lots of designers right now. I saw actually quite a few by surprise. I saw lots of emerging designers that I know from London, being in Pitti, and showing, and doing sales there. And they told me that the game is completely different, from when they are in Paris or when they are in London. So it's a very, very different game there, which I think, they support them in a great way. So perhaps even if Milan doesn't do it, I think,
Pitti, I felt we were
Pitti,
talking about this morning. I felt it had a really, you go to Pitti a lot, don't you? I feel I had a difficult few years, where it kind of clashed with London, and it was a bit dodgy. And now it's back, and this, it's interesting because it felt it helped make the Italian part of the men's shows really significant, Gosha and Raf. It's really, really impressive, actually really relevant, exciting shows that, and it actually, weirdly, when I was there, I was kind of worried that it would make Paris feel a bit dead, because when you're in Paris, that Gosha show and that Raf show, they're such staples of Paris, and I was what's Paris? And I didn't feel flat at all, because Paris, there's so much, so many different designers, so eclectic anyway. But definitely having those 2 in Florence was a huge thing. But then it even more emphasised that how flat the rest of Milan felt, I think, for me.
I think Milan is just going through a bit of a change at the moment. I think to move it away from sort of young designers and up to sort of established designers, which is kind of what Milan is known for, it just seems that a lot of these big brands are having to recalibrate to try and find out, as part of a bigger picture, I think that's been happening from fashion for quite a few years now. You've seen a lot of diffusion brands close. You've seen a lot of shops close that aren't necessarily profitable. I think big brands are having to concentrate once again on what actually their USP is.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about it in that way, it makes it more understandable why someone like Calvin Klein is thinking, you know, supposedly of like merging men's and women's creative director together to make it sort of something that feels like it's got a DNA again. I think that's what's happened to big brands. Big brands, a lot of them have kind of lost their DNA, lost touch with what they're actually about. And I think Milan this year, for me, felt very much like a lot of them starting to sort of take baby footsteps again at finding out what their role is in the market again. I think Gucci's done it incredibly well.
And so quickly,
But their place in the market, which is gender fluidity, young designer, might not necessarily be the best thing for another brand. Like I mean, Calvin Klein actually probably would be quite good for. But another big brand, like for example, Xenia or something like that, that's also currently creative directorless. That might not necessarily be the right thing. Maybe that's the fact they go in the other direction and have to go more masculine again.
What do we all make of the Gucci thing? Because I'm fascinated. We were talking about it this morning as well, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. But I'm fascinated by this kind of like willful eclecticism, and you know, when we're seeing these collections that are like stuffed full of like stuff, like literally, it's like, you know, product, exactly. And there's so much of it, and so much of it is accessories. So it's interesting to have you here, because firstly it feels very, very seasonless. Like I'd find it like pretty much impossible to look at someone wearing Gucci and say what season it's from, which is probably brilliant, I think, because it in a way is more respectful to the consumer, but it also means like they can drop throughout the year constantly, and it doesn't.
And it's the only way that a brand can be truly global now, because it's going to be a different season on one side of the world against the other.
And it really plays into like the direction in which sales is happening. Like that old style of like American big department stores, I mean, isn't working now. It's everyone's saying.
What do you mean when you say the old style of American big, like just buying like
that big multi-brand thing isn't working? Like the majority of sales now is like that, like you click that what's new in. It's like that online, like as it moves forward, it'll be even more so like through your phone. Like the sales through phone is going up and up and up. And it's just like you need, as a brand, to be catering to that. You need to have the stuff that keeps dropping, that is evolving, that is like that fast moving thing. And it needs to be delivered with like a story and a personality, and it's like an energy and an emotion. It can't just be like product in a store like it used to be. And I think that like brands like Gucci, which has cottoned onto that and changed up and moved quickly into it, are really capitalizing on it, which is why it's interesting to have it in Milan, because traditionally like that's not the place that you see that.
No. And what do you think about this obsession? Like I also feel like fashion jewellery is having like even more of like I think part of that is the Saint Laurent
especially with
effect.
men's.
But it's really fascinating. You're right, especially with men's. Like Eddie Sman did that so successfully, like growing across every category. It wasn't just bags and shoes. It was like
everything.
The jewellery, the clothes, and all of that. And I think a lot of brands are following that now.
Of course. But Gucci's done really well with that. Like I thought the campaigns with Florence were really like on point. It's like, it's clever.
I think that for me, I think, you know, like when I see someone like Gucci, you know, from my perspective, you know, what I think about is that these brands primarily are based on selling accessories, leather goods, you know, shoes, bags. You know, this is where, and of course, you know, it's all the beauty section, you know, of these brands that they're making like so much money for them. So actually, you know, to see that the apparel plays so much big factor right now, you know, it's quite important, because before you would see bags, backpacks, everything, but you know, you wouldn't see people actually being obsessed about the actual clothes. And now you see that they're back in the game. You know, the clothes are equally important for
But that's
them.
another model that's, I think it has to be like that, because it was so unsustainable, this model before, where like we all kind of knew that they didn't sell the clothes and no one really said anything. It was like this really weird thing where it's like, and I don't know if that can be solved. Like I still sit at a lot of fashion shows and go, none of this is going to make it into production or like ever into a store or ever be worn beyond that model and a couple more models over the next sort of few months. But I think it doesn't feel like that's what Gucci are going for. It does feel like they're trying to make their clothing a part.
Yeah, when you go to the store, it's like you see the runway collection, and it's quite exciting. Like because I mean, to see that kind of men, like, the gender fluidity, you think like, oh, it's probably gonna end up with suits, like, Margiela, for example. That's a big thing with Margiela. When you go to the store, you never see anything that was on the runway.
It's very suity, yeah.
It's very suity.
Yeah.
And I like what they do at Margiela, because what the menswear team is amazing there. I think what they're doing is good, but it's not the same case with Gucci. Gucci is actually trying to deliver.
Well, Alessandro Michele spoke openly about this and said that he wanted to produce everything that he made, and that's like a real point. So there isn't ever like a catwalk look that doesn't. I mean, I don't know. There are certain pieces that I've never seen actually make it into a store, but I'm sure that is correct. That's how it does work. But it's interesting we talk about gender fluidity, because I don't see that so much with it. Like, I see that it's kind of a bit foppish and a bit romantic, but I think it's more, like, I talk about this endlessly because I'm really interested about it, but I think it's more like the age thing that's interesting, like this obsession with old things, like things that look like they're vintage, and he called it fake vintage once. But like, particularly in this collection, the men's collection that we just saw, like, pieces were made to look battered, and I think that's really interesting. It's interesting actually to get your perspective on this, because I do think there's like a men's style heritage thing of like, it's quite aristocratic to wear quite battered things and like not care too much, and like, do you think that is something that can be synonymous with luxury?
Well, I think kind of Hedi Slimane with Saint Laurent kind of proved that model worked and worked really successfully. So it's not that intelligent to go, that's working, let's do that. Like, oh wait, let's make product that people want to wear that doesn't look, that you can get away with wearing without looking like you've spent a fortune on it. That your friends that aren't in fashion won't be like, oh, you've spent £2,000 on that, you fucking chump. Like, which is often like, I feel like in this day and age, like, cool people don't want to look expensive. Like, I don't, like, if I'm to spend money on Gucci, I want most of my friends not to realise I'm wearing Gucci and just think it's nice. I think people want to look
like they have things that are precious rather than things that are expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting that they're going so much down the vintage route, because it is the kind of like, that's a luxury that you can't get. Like, if you weren't handed down pieces by some fabulous grandpa or grandma, you weren't handed down, your grandfather's ring or like jacket or whatever, you can't, it's really hard to get that, and vintage has become so like, as commodified and commercialised as high fashion, so expensive now. So I think it is really interesting that they're trying to tap into that sense of like rarity and preciousness, but it's very different to that idea of luxury, which is like, perfect, like very
which isn't cool.
No.
I mean, to move it on to I guess briefly to Paris as well, obviously what comes to mind is the Valentino show in Paris, where that was all based this season on unfinishedness. So it's like, it's that kind of impression that I suppose you are getting something that's still being worked on, and it could have been like given away, or it's been worked in the shop and just not finished, or there's something about having something that's kind of unique and feels authentic in some way. I think you see that with like men wearing distressed jeans at the moment. It makes you look authentic, like an authentic rock star, by wearing jeans like that, rather than having to like do the work yourself, or like buying Converse that are already scuffed. Same thing.
It's interesting, isn't that? Because that's run in parallel to this obsession with like the perfect clean white trainer as well. So it's like, it goes in different ways, but I do think it's fascinating. I did think a lot about Gucci when I was looking at the Valentino show, and think about that idea of like, just feel like, it's interesting to use the word authenticity, but like, I also think it's about like proof of why something is expensive. And I think people,
but not conspicuous about it.
I remember
conspicuous, but it's really weird, 'cause it's completely conspicuous if you're wearing something that's been beaten up artificially. But it's kind of that theory that other people might look at it and still think like, oh, he's had that for like years and years.
Exactly. It was his grandfather. That's how chic.
I remember speaking to a friend about why he bought Saint Laurent, because at the time I just couldn't get my head around it. I was like, that's just a shirt. That's just a shirt that looks like anything else. And he's like, yeah, but it looks like the perfect version of that. Like, it's like, it is like exactly what I want, but I'm not going to spend the next like 3 months trawling through every vintage shop to find a similar quality of one. And it's like, okay, I kind of get that. Like, if you've got the money to spend on it and you want the archetypal version of that, then you would just buy it. And and when you actually when I actually considered it, it was beautiful, and it was the perfect version of that shirt.
Also, I don't think we can underestimate just how much men like become belonging as part of a club. Like, you buy a Saint Laurent shirt, because it's the perfect version of a Saint Laurent shirt, but also everyone's buying a part of that club. They want to be a part of that club.
Yeah.
It's the same with Gucci. People want to be a part of that cool club, and it is a cool club.
Yeah.
Like, the people that wear it are cool. Like, when I went to the Gucci show, I went and, like, embarrassingly introduced myself to Oli Alexander, because
years and
years, because he's really cool and I love him. But I suddenly felt a little bit part of that club.
Embarrassing.
They
had like
us and like thousands of people.
It's so embarrassing. Gucci had like a drinks that night and he was at it and he walked past and I was talking to Tim Blanks and Charlie and we were explaining to Tim like Tim recognised him but like couldn't place the band or something. So we were like years and years and then he was like sing it. So me and Charlie were like like really loud, like doing the song, and then Ollie was like there, and I was
you should have just turned around to him and gone, "Come on, Ollie, you know this one."
I was like, oh my god, it's awful. But I know. But do you think that filters down to like all like? It's interesting with Gucci because it's the archetypal example of like if you showed a catwalk image to your average person on the street, they'd be like, she looks ridiculous or he looks ridiculous.
But then if they saw you wearing just a piece from it, they'd be like, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it will? Do you think it does filter down? Do you think it that?
Yeah, I definitely do. Like I've got like a shirt, and I like just wear it about casually because I don't want to be precious with it.
Yeah.
And like I get like all sorts of my friends like asking, "Oh, that's really nice. Where'd you get that?" Yeah. And then I feel like an idiot because I have to tell them it's Gucci.
It's Gucci. But they've been very interesting because I think I read someone wrote something. I can't remember who it was. Or maybe they didn't write it, but they just said it to me. They said one thing that's really great about it is you're completely right. It's made like cool people feel really cool, like people who are interested in kind of like, you know, sexual politics or gender politics. Someone like Ollie Alexander will wear it and be really engaged with it. But they wrote that it also made people who are actually pretty uncool feel cool and relevant because a lot of it is like very, very showy. It's completely covered in logos. It's like embellished like to within an inch of its life. So actually, it kind of does speak to that guy who just wants like, you know, something really showy, you know, some big embroidered loafers and can feel really fabulous, but feel like, I like it because I think it is quite inclusive, which is such an embarrassing word to use in the context of high fashion because no high fashion is inclusive. But with Saint Laurent there was like that edge, that like loftiness, and like we're a bit too cool, whereas this is so like joyful and it doesn't feel particularly like, you know, you can't be a part of this gang. I kind of like that about it.
Yeah, but those two brands also, they kind of similar kind of that model of the business that Eddie Slimane created with that kind of every season kind of the same thing, but kind of different. Yeah. So it's like, if you go on the website now, and you kind of watch a cruise collection or the men's collection, you cannot tell, not the difference, but there is lots of design differences. For me, it's like so much design, so much research in this. Yeah. But then you can kind of see it and like you don't know if it's from spring summer or is it cruise or is it a year ago. You know.
But then I like designers like that. It's interesting because we're probably going to talk about Prada shortly, which is the complete opposite of that, where it changes every season. But I do think there is a moment where right now where designers are doing things that are completely seasonless. Like I think you look at someone like Craig Green and it's important.
You can do differently. You know, you have to go seasonless at this stage. You know, because you're selling. It's what exactly you said. You know, you're selling like worldwide right now. So you know, you cannot choose one season and stick to it because you know the fabrics, everything changes from time to time. But what I want to say on the previous conversation was that what I find very, very interesting, and also, find it very interesting within my friends or, within the customers of the store, that I see them, coming in, is that how easily they can, let's say that you don't have the money or you don't want actually to wear like a big brand on you. So how easily you can imitate that style, and go out and wear it, and some people have like amazing sense of style. So they can actually put things together, that they costing no more than, £100 basically, pretty much the whole outfit. And they look like they came out of a catwalk. Yeah. So I think for me it's a very, very important also factor to understand that, how easily you can imitate an outfit from the catwalk or not. That's quite of, nice kind of thinking that I have. When I see, for example, Raf Simons shows, I know that no one can imitate that. That's the big difference is that, if you try to imitate a Raf Simons outfit from the catwalk, you're going to look, extremely bad. Yeah. But when something is based so much on vintage, then you have lots of resources around you to be able, even if you cannot afford this, to look.
That was. I always felt like that was kind of Medium Kirchhoff's problem because I loved what they did, but the problem was like there were so many Medium Kirchhoff girls who obviously loved it and lived for it, but probably never bought a piece of it. But they looked like medium. They had like crazy coloured hair, and they'd wear like baby doll dresses. They'd look a bit like, you know, weird sparkly shit that they'd got like down Dalston. Like, it wasn't like they'd gone and bought. And I do agree with you with Gucci that like you could be a Gucci girl and not necessarily buy the stuff and be a Gucci boy.
You could arguably say that about Saint Laurent though, couldn't you?
Yes.
Like Saint Laurent, you could just like
100%.
go out and buy the. I think the thing that's interesting about Gucci is, I guess it's up to Alessandro himself to work out how those individual pieces are different enough that you can't go out and just rip them off.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you look at his DIY jackets that he's doing at the moment, and they're so unbelievably like intricate.
Yeah.
Especially on, like, I suppose it's more successful on pieces where he's taken items and vintageized them, if that's a word. Like taking his silk bomber jackets and making them seem like they're packed with like chinoiserie from like the mid 18th century.
Yeah.
Like, it's when he mixes. I've got one there. There we go. If you mix them together like that, you can't just go out and buy that.
Well, that was like a big theme with this show. Was it was all about travel, but it was kind of like, and I know every luxury collection is always about travel, but this was like this idea.
But there was
of, like,
loads of travel and adventure this time.
Yeah,
that was
so
the
much,
massive theme.
The massive theme, particularly in Milan, because Prada did it as well.
Exactly.
But it really came through, I think, in the way he mashed things together. So it felt like it was things of like from different eras, but also like you would have, as you say, like you'd have a cartoon, like a really modern cartoon, next to this kind of like something that looked like it was maybe from like ancient China, and like I think that is interesting because that mashup is really hard to replicate. Like it is fascinating. Do we like New Gucci though? Like
I think it's
I wasn't the biggest fan of this last collection. I thought it was there wasn't anything in it that I personally wanted to buy. Compared to the last few, which I've wanted everything and had to really severely edit down what I was going to be buying.
But I think it's changed a lot. That is actually something that I was really reflecting on when I was writing about it this season. We talk about how consistent it is, but then I actually revisited like the very first one just after Frida Giannini had left. And then also the one after he'd been formally announced, and it is different. Like then it's more bohemian, but it's much less embellished. And I think the child thing has become so much more prominent. Like now it does feel like sometimes like little boys in costume, and like it's
becoming more and more fun.
Yeah, exactly.
And less
like this is not.
I actually think this first collection as well was more gender fluid, to go back to it, because it was literally guys wearing archive women's Gucci shirts. That is what I mean. The problem is that no one's really figured out what they mean by gender fluidity, even though it gets thrown around so much in the press. They haven't worked out whether that means gender neutral, whether that means men wearing women's clothes, whether that means women wearing men's clothes, and those are actually three different categories. I think very different categories. But that first collection was very much like men wearing actual women's clothes. That's more gender fluid. Now you've got like men wearing very feminine versions of men's clothes, very dandyish versions of men's clothes, which is very, very different, I think.
And also,
it's also very 70s. He's like lots of research on lapels and stuff. But this one was like, I went to the store and I tried that blouson with the pussy about. But you know, it really feels so like you really feel so like liberated somehow. I don't know. But it was just beautiful. But the price tag was like, woof.
Yeah, nice to try. But it is interesting also though when I think he references a lot of historical costume, and I think what's interesting in that is that in itself can look very gender fluid or very girly, for want of kind of a better word. But actually really has nothing to do with the conversations that we're currently having about androgyny or gender relations in any way. Like, but if you actually look at men's costume, like men did wear like knickerbockers and long socks and like those little kind of shoes he does that almost look like a kind of Mary Jane. It also looks like a historical men's, like all the ruffs, and I think that's interesting because it makes you think about the history of menswear. And how actually the history of menswear started way before the suit, and it was all of these like capes and like real costume, and I think that's quite fascinating. But I do agree with you, it's got less gender fluid. Like the girls now wear like really high like heels.
High heels and huge dresses.
Yeah. It's interesting. So let's move to talk about Prada, because that's like the other cornerstone. But Prada is like a completely different model, in that it's so seasonal. Completely different statement. She loves doing like this kind of U-turn, but this was also completely about travel as well. But it was a really different kind of travel. It was much more like, it's quite dystopian. I think it's because the models had to walk uphill to at the show, which a lot of clever journalists.
I think it was genius. It was an amazing collection.
Did you like? You really like
God,
it?
yeah.
I really liked it.
Did you? Why did you like it?
I loved it. I just think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like really like, and just fresh and cool and.
In
Right.
detail section, you can actually
Yeah.
see each bag. It's like so much detail. The prints
Yeah.
and that nylon bag. Well, she
owns the nylon. Yeah.
It's. I think it was just beautiful, this collection.
A lot of like quick-witted journalists kind of equated the financial difficulties of Prada, which is like people love to talk about like what's Prada going to do, because obviously they are having they have had a sort of decline in sales and profits. With the fact that they all had to walk uphill and they were like, what a struggle. But what do we think the answer is? I
think that's a bit of maybe a little bit of a reach. I thought actually from a business perspective, it felt like a very, very savvy collection from Prada, because when I went to the re-see the next day and you actually get up close to all of those looks, you see just how much product they put on those people and how many things there are to potentially buy on each of those looks.
Yeah.
Like each of those models was wearing probably about 25 things.
Yeah.
Like when you look at it, it's like they're actually wearing 3 coats and loads of little leather bits and bags. And so I think actually from a business perspective, I think it was a really savvy collection compared to many of their others.
I also think it actually brought together a lot of what Prada does really well. Like we're talking about like the sportswear thing, you know, with those like ugly fabrics and the technical fabrics and unusual fabrics. They were there, but then also they were like, you can't really see them in the runway pictures, and it was partly because the styling was so layered, but there was like fuckloads of those kind of like ridiculous prints that they do. Like, there's like a sombrero and like shit like that. But like if you think of like the golf collection and stuff like that, so I think they kind of brought together a lot of what Prada does well. I agree with you, it's a commercially savvy collection, but that was the same last season. Even though last season was much more historical and kind of formal, it was also like packed with product. So it obviously is like the new their approach to solving this.
Really cool prints too. They had that meteorological like on the nylon printed. I was like, oh, that's amazing.
You liked it?
I thought it's just like genius. This just take the like weather report and put it on the fabric.
But what do you think about when like luxury brands do things that are this sporty and this like?
Well, I think it's like whereas like Gucci's doing the Saint Laurent approach, this is kind of doing the Kim Jones approach. Like I think.
This actually does look a lot like a Louis Vuitton Kim Jones kit. It's like I don't think they copied it by any means. But the Spring Summer 13, like the underwater one. Tell me more about what you mean by the Kim Jones approach.
What do I mean by the Kim Jones approach? I don't know. It's just that like practical, beautiful, well-made thing that you will have forever. That is modern, but it also is timeless. And he does that high fashion sport thing so well, and I don't know. This just has that energy to it. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. And Vuitton changes every season as well.
Completely.
But also, he always have somehow this beautiful, I don't know, like desire. Like you desire that man, you know. All the girl you always desire, like what he does for Louis Vuitton, what he did for his own brand. Yeah. It's just like always, even like he collaborated with like Luke Smalley, and it's just like always that.
We were talking about this in the London one. We were saying that this was like a sexy season, but like sexy in this weird way where it's kind of quite like carnal and quite real. Like I think you saw that a lot in London, with things like Peter or Kottweiler. And we were saying I don't think you see it so much in like a Jodie Anderson or definitely not in a Gucci. Like there are things in Gucci that are quite like fetishy, but it's not very like. Fuck, that guy's really hot. Like you know, like he looks like he's like an Alice in Wonderland extra. But then if you look at this, it feels much more. Yeah, and maybe that does speak to what we were talking about with kind of new conversations about gender, because maybe it is a case that men are more comfortable with their sexuality and being. I don't know. It's interesting. Like there was a lot of that, like Raph doing something all about Maplethorpe, like you know, it's interesting to think about why
we
that.
have to go.
You will have to go to that.
Should we talk about the Raph Simmons collection? It was shown in Italy. Do you want to talk about Pitti? Why do we think? Sorry, I'll just let Brett find it. It's interesting to see someone champion Maplethorpe in that such a specific time. Like, why do you think it feels right for now? Why do you loved it? Why did you like it so much? You're like, yes.
Yes. First of all, I mean, I know it might be like really big what I'm going to say, but I personally consider, Raph to be like a genius. And I think that, he's probably for me the best menswear designer. So, every season he delivers like something truly amazing, to the public. Now, when we were in the showroom and we were talking about it, basically they told us that Raph had started like a completely other collection to do. Yeah. And then, halfway, like the Maplethorpe collaboration came on board. So, they changed the whole thing, like basically in almost like 2 months. And he's really amazing because he took like something super iconic but also very difficult in many ways when it comes down to product, so for the stores to buy into it, because obviously the photography of Robert Mapplethorpe is something very, very specific, so
and incredibly explicit,
exactly, so it represents something like a very kind of specific audience, but then Ralph took it and make it his own thing, and you can see he always respects his collaborators, he did the same thing with Celine Ruby, like he always, whenever he collaborates, he always shows a massive respect and puts the work right there, right in front, and I think it's overall that was definitely a season of collaborations, because if you go to Gosha, if you go to Vetements, if you go to everyone, there were like massive collaborations happening around. So I think he owns the menswear. I mean, you can see like the shapes, the oversized shapes with all the crop top sweaters and everything. It looks just perfect. The fabrics are really amazing. It's actually, you can dissect this collection, take piece by piece, and you can wear it as you wish, as you want. And
it was funny at the show, wasn't it? Because he had all of his archive out.
He showed to the kids, like, I own this.
Yes, spread so quickly. Because I remember I told you, you were like freaking out, like so quickly throughout the venue, that it was going to be his last ever show. Like literally, like, and people like someone. I'm not going to say who it was, but someone really important told me it with like real authority. They were like, "It's his last show," and I was like, "It's his last show," and everyone was freaking out. Obviously, it's not his last show, but I think it was interesting that he got his archive out and kind of like.
But I agree with you. It's kind of like showing. You know what?
I did it first.
I've done the whole thing here.
Because Gosha is the next day, but then you see who did this idea.
I think it was, the whole thing was like super exciting, and also what we didn't see on the catwalk, actually, there is like a whole collection within the collection that is going to go in the stores, which includes hoodies, jumpers, from a trip that he had like in Africa. So he was like very inspired by that, and it's very different from the whole Robert Mapplethorpe collaboration.
Oh, but they're doing that as well.
Yeah, but he didn't show it on the catwalk. But I just think that he's every season he's just delivering one of the best collections ever, and he's definitely setting up trends.
Yeah, definitely.
He does. And also I like what he does. He always respects the artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
He doesn't many people blow it up. No, he kept it as the format as Mapplethorpe would do, like 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 inches.
Yeah.
You can see like he never like.
And the clothes almost worked as frames.
Yes.
That's what I thought was particularly lovely,
beautiful.
because it was very, very. It was very respectful. It's interesting that you're mentioning the collaborations thing, because why is that so in the air? Because it was like completely the season. Is it cynically? Is it just a way of people getting more press and like shipping more product? Why is everyone collaborating with everyone? Like it's but you're seeing it even like I think part of it is the retail model. Like if you think of something like a Dover Street or a Machinette, that kind of vibe where like people do these interesting like hookups between quite unexpected. It just seems like it's such a thing, but I wonder why.
I think it's kind of funny because if we talk about Gosha, for example, everyone knows the story about like a few seasons ago with all the Tommy Hilfiger idea, that obviously he took it and he made it his own, but then I think that from that point and onwards, this season he collaborated with 6 different companies, in one collection basically. So it's from Fila to Kappa to Sergio Tacchini, So I think also it was kind of like a reference, a bit to I'm in Italy, so I'm going to do something really amazing. But I think overall it's a very smart way for him like to carry on doing the kind of sportswear, streetwear thing that he's extremely strong at, but then also introducing other pieces from his main collection. So there isn't that kind of clash in a way of what my main collection is about. So the collaborations are part, of course, of his whole collection, but I think his main collection this season was focused mainly on the suits. It was the crushed velvets, it was like all the stripy ones, it was like all the tailoring actually that was going in the collection. I think that was kind of his main focus,
and a bit of a shift,
and a bit of a shift, and he gives the options to the stores that they're selling him, because obviously he got established by offering something that is like streetwear for skate guys to be related to. So I think that carrying and keep happy and all this 90s energy. You know, Fila is very 90s. You know, Carvell the same. You know, he's really kind of like into this world.
And it gives authenticity to the references that he's using.
Yeah,
like, it's not just like
exactly.
I'm doing a fake Fila. It is I'm doing Fila, but I'm doing it
completely
in a luxury way.
Well, I spoke to him about this collection, and he kind of said that he was like, you know, like Sergio Tacchini is like the perfect tracksuit. So why would you try and do it like a, you know, a red track? Like you might as well. And that's interesting. What do we think of like? There's been a bit of a kind of I think there has been a slight backlash in terms of this like notion of like the appropriation of working class culture, and I think that's always going to have. It's going to be an endless discussion that rumbles on because sportswear and streetwear as sort of being so widely created within a high fashion context, but a lot of that has been levied particularly at Gosha. What do we think about that?
Well, I think that streetwear is reaching up, so fashion can reach down. Like if you look at Supreme and brands like that, they're reaching upwards, so why can't fashion reach down? Like,
but also, I guess it's just the vibe of, I mean, I'm coming from post-Soviet bloc too, so this is like I've been bullied maybe by this kind of guys in like 90s. no, like literally, it's that's the look.
You're like it's strangely familiar.
It's strangely familiar. No, but it is. It's just like, but now it's a trend, you know. And in 2008 when he showed his show in Moscow or St. Petersburg, he said like he's gonna be famous in 10 years. And look at it, it's like 8 years and he's like all over the world.
And the kids are obsessed. With this, but like they really are. Like all those kids who are modelling in that, he found them off Instagram.
Yeah.
And they were like, he's our hero. Like I was speaking to a couple of them, obviously doing my research, fraternised with the male models. And they were really like obsessed with him. Like they were like, he's our hero, he's amazing. Like
what were their reasons for saying that?
Like I think it was like firstly his aesthetic. I think they love like those clothes, like they're really into like sneakers and that kind of stuff. I think the other thing is like they feel like he is like a voice for kind of like young men, particularly skaters. I think there's an interesting element of the fact that he is sort of like the gay culture aspect of it. I also I think it gives those boys like an invitation into fashion that probably like we like to think existed before, because brands were endlessly trying to like do like youth stuff, but I think for them, like, it feels really authentic, but it's also so exclusive. Like, that's the other clever thing about it. It's like, the book's a limited edition. You have to, like, rush to get it, and he's kept it really controlled, and, even like, that's clever.
Even even in terms of, you know, the way that they make the sales, you know, they have caps, you know, they if I'm not mistaken, I think that they're not opening any more, you know, accounts around the world. But, I mean, they do know the growth, but also, you know, they don't want, like, to, I'm guessing, you know, to burn a brand, you know, like, and actually overexpose it, you know, in a crazy way. I think, you know, that the type of customer of Gosha for all these collaborations is definitely the same customer that buys Supreme and Palace. You know, this is completely, you know, the type of customer for that. And both of these brands, you know, Supreme and Palace, are commercially super successful. And every single store, even, you know, the big high-end stores, this is exactly the comparison, is that they try to follow, you know, the model of Supreme. Drops every Thursday, you know, special collaborations, projects. It has been proven to be, right now as we're talking, is the most successfully commercial.
It's fascinating that it's like,
commercial
it's such an
retail project.
Like Supreme has never properly engaged with Fashion Week or anything like that, and yet that you're right. Like everyone is trying to copy that model. Like, like culturally relevant collaboration. You know, like they did like. The kids skateboard, and Jodie Brunson's doing a Larry Clark collaboration. Like it's everyone's copying.
But
that
also
model.
see like the way that, you know, big retail stores, even big department stores right now, doing drops, you know, a specific day of the week. You know, that wouldn't happen, you know, like 2 or 3 years ago. You know, and now everyone is, you know, dropping on Friday, on Thursday, on Wednesday. You know, everyone is trying like actually to tap into this kind of market, and this is why it's very important. I don't think that there is a clash, you know, between street and fashion, and I don't think actually any of the customers that we're dealing with when we're selling Gosha, for example, does really, you know, care to be, you know, very in a way, very, very simple way, because for them it's more about, you know, it's kind of a whole community thing, you know, they have whole forums, you know, created for Gosha, that they go there, they log in and they say, you know, Doris, we had that drop, Machina had that drop, you know,
we had this today, this is so
you know,
funny,
like,
we literally had this
you know, here on the,
conversation.
you know, like, it's happening, like, it's whole forums.
But they find it before, like, the girls who are uploading product to like our e-store, they put up something Gosha, and like they hadn't even like I think they just said it live. We hadn't put it on social media. It wasn't any like it was you almost couldn't find it on the site and something sold.
It
and we were
happened,
like how did you
it
like it's not
in the
even barely
forums,
visible.
you know, they're like, you know, it just dropped on SHOWstudio.
It's so weird.
RSS feed.
Yeah, it's that kind of mentality.
I'm just like, who has the time to be
kids
that?
the kids that queue overnight
exactly.
outside
Everybody
Supreme.
wants that queue.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
every brand wants that cool like you know queue. You just pass them, you're like, I want to be part of that.
But then it's so weird, like just whizzing back over to Milan, away from Florence, flying around Italy. But it's so weird to sit at a lot of the shows and consider that, where you're looking at things that are meant to be like high fashion, like super luxury, like what's a good example, like a Dolce & Gabbana or something like that. And it feels like fashion is so in your face. Like those brands are like trying to force themselves onto people, you know, like they're trying to always be collaborating with people, and as we said, like, you know, advertising and getting credits. And actually I think that's not really the model. Like what's interesting about Supreme and Palace, or Salis as I just is like how they pull back. Like you have to go to them. It's not like in your face, in your face, in your face.
Well, as I was saying earlier, like most men's brands, I think, trade on the fact that they create a club.
Yeah, you're
like
totally
the
right.
successful ones at the moment are ones that have created a movement around them, have created a club, in whatever way that is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are plenty of shows that we set out where we think, like, well, who is the customer for this?
Yeah.
Like, who are they meant to be appealing to?
Yeah.
They haven't worked out who their club is.
Yeah.
Some people think that's through attracting massive celebrities, and actually sometimes it's not.
No,
the celebrities are actually second to that.
Yeah.
I would argue that Gucci, whilst they're, you know, linked to a lot of celebrities now, I don't think they got the celebrities on board first.
No, they didn't.
The celebrities came when everyone else was really getting into it.
Yeah, when the stylist fell in love with it and started dressing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think you're right, actually, because Gosha, you can never imagine Gosha dressing a celebrity or asking, like, but then there's loads of all those kids.
But also there are lots of celebrities actually that are buying Gosha.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like, I mean, there are like many celebrities, and you know, it depends. I mean, obviously, you know, depends like how. Yeah, who is like celebrity, but you know, like very famous, you know, people that they're coming in and actually they're buying Gosha, you know, and they want like to wear them. But what is super interesting about, you know, the Supreme Palace and Gosha model is that, you know, you're tapping into a market, you know, from like completely financial point of view, you know, that you're tapping into a market that is going to follow you at least for 2 decades. You know, you're going to have the same customer. That is super important for a brand to grow. So, for example, if you're like Supreme, you're selling to someone that is like 13, 14 years old, that's going to go there with a father. That boy or a girl, they're going to grow slowly. They're going to like to keep like shopping from there. When they reach like mid-30s or 40s, they're going to like to take like probably their kids to start like doing that. And they keep like the same customer for like 20 years.
Which is so funny as a model, because when you think about that, that's the model. You know, when you read a magazine and you see those terrible watch adverts, it's like a father handing his watch over to his son. But like it is that, like, it's the age-old model that everyone in menswear wants. You know, in luxury menswear is this idea of like generation to generation.
And you know, you see kind of you know, this is why, you know, everyone considers that the young audience is so important to them. Otherwise they wouldn't get into so many collaborations, these big high-end brands. They would stay with the same clientele that they had before. But now they're realizing that we have to become extremely relevant, extremely connected with a very young audience in order for us to grow and grow.
But also their price point is, you know, it's...
Oh yes, 100%.
That's I think also is the major thing, because like, you know, like I like what, for example, Chris Van Ash is doing at Dior, but sometimes like what he's doing is not resonating with the price point. Like he's doing like all this, like, you know, like rave kind of culture, and then the rave kind of jacket is not gonna cost like £3,000. You know, but that's why it's like Supreme and like.
But that's going back to the Gucci thing. That's why people are doing all that stuff. It's so whatever price you have, you can buy.
Well, like why Burberry started doing makeup for women and things.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you start with the lip gloss when you're a sort of you're young girl, and you graduate to the trench coat.
Look at Calvin Klein at the moment. It's in like Calvin Klein are usually on the Milan schedule, so they didn't show this season, but we can discuss them. Like that My Calvin's campaign is like just reposition, like and it's basically, it's not advertising products, it's advertising Calvin Klein, like it's advertising a brand, and like that's really fascinating.
The revival of the My Calvin.
Yeah, and they've been, the team that they've got is just amazing. Like I got to like +1 in on Adua at the huge thing that they did in Palm Springs. And it was just so well orchestrated. It was just like undeniably naturally cool, and they just had like tons of products and they were just gifting it out like really like naturally, and like every interesting cool person that came in left with like a year's worth of supply.
Yeah.
So it's just gonna you're
just gonna see it everywhere.
But it was done in such a like an easy way that you didn't feel like you were being like pimped out.
Yeah, which you completely are. That's what's so clever about it. Is it's like
and that relates all the way through to the branding and all of the new campaigns. It's just like so on point and effortless that it just.
But it ties together all of those discussions about like body image and diversity and because it's so much and like feminism, depictions of women, because like they've managed to generate all these mini debates and think pieces around that campaign, but really like there's so many different people in it. They've got Kate Moss in it for like someone who wants just like to look at a more traditional fashion advert, but then they've got like
Grace. It's really democratizing.
Yeah, I was like, what? It's like you're always gonna like one of them, aren't you?
But it was a bit like a PR version of a Supreme release, wasn't it?
Yeah,
they basically have dropped them and been like, okay, we're going to leave this here and you're going to talk about this now. We're going to save this one for another couple of weeks. Then we're going to drop this one. Then you can start talking to us again.
Yeah.
So the hashtag My Calvins campaign, we've been talking about that now, probably coming up for what? 6 months?
Yeah.
And whereas if you drop a traditional advertising campaign, you're like, here you go.
And it's all the
well, it's not that you don't give a shit, but you talk about it for that moment. But then the conversation dries up. Whereas they've like basically kept Beyonce in the industry for like 6 months.
And also all the other things like sponsoring Justin Bieber's tour, so that he's wearing it every single night on stage and. Like Instagram, every single it's relentless. It's like so intelligently done.
And they've gone with an entry level product, which is underwear. Like everyone can go out and buy a pair of Calvin Klein. Even though we're advertising jeans here, everyone can go out and buy a pair of pants.
And also the cleverest thing is I think campaigns that are almost made to be faked are so clever, and that's what's so clever about my Calvin's thing is the number of fake versions that people have put up. Like it's all
and they make fun of it.
That's
also that's what's
and
good
they're
about
playing
it.
to that, and then you're like, that's how things get shared. Like it's so embarrassing, when a brand sends around an advertising campaign, and it can be absolutely beautiful, shot by an incredible photographer, and they've got the picture, and they say the hashtag for this is, and it's something like I don't know, like trench coat now or something really awful, and you're like, that's not going to take off. Like no one's going to just start. But the My Calvin's thing, it's like it's something that lends itself to internet culture.
Hashtags are meant to tap you into a conversation. And I think a lot of PR people go wrong by trying to create that conversation themselves.
Exactly.
Like, actually, what you need to do is tap into conversations that are already happening.
That's already happening.
Which is why Gosha's been really clever.
And
like the thing with him is like. Yeah, it plays into all of the kids, but it plays into the paranoia of the adults that have money, because you want to be buying into the cool. Like you see this relentlessly like beautiful, youthful, like cool kid, and you're not that, but you want to be part of it. You know what I mean?
Speaks to kid adults.
Like, and that I don't fully know how I feel about the book. If you look like.
The new one.
The new one. It's so young. It's like I was like. I don't really know how this relates to me.
One of the kids in the show was 13.
Yeah. Wow.
I was talking to him and he told me, when was he born? He was born in like 2002 or something. And I was like,
after millennium,
I'm having a conversation with you, like you're a functioning human. It freaked me out so much.
Yeah.
But don't you think that this is
weird.
Honest? Yeah. Don't you think that this is honest? Because, he obviously feels that, this is my audience. He knows his audience, and he puts his audience right back. You're like, because I design partly for you as well. So, I put you, right there, like to be.
It's not like he just designs for them, he also lives from them.
He lives with them, like it's I think it's like his whole world. I mean, like in that show, it felt so nice that you see it's very true to himself, he's not someone that he's going to do it because it's fashionable, it's trendy,
difficult,
or
isn't it? Because ethically, I don't know what I think about it. Because Gosha, he's like 34. Don't know.
Can theoretically people that are 14 afford Gosha?
You can.
My brother is. Their rich parents can get bullied into buying it for them.
But also, you could feasibly save up for it.
You can save up because when a t-shirt
I'm just thinking
is like
about what I was doing when I was 15.
Is Gosha's t-shirt
£50?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can
1.5.
No, 50. Yeah.
You're like 1.5. You're like, I sadly got to go.
But like the socks are like £15-20. So like the kids,
I mean,
because
I think I would have less. I have less of a problem. I have less of a problem seeing someone that's like very, as in their teens, in a brand like that than maybe someone that's like a teenage model that's in like a couture gown that theoretically
that's what I get.
is
I
never
got so
going to
annoyed
be a
this season
thing.
with people going, "Oh, it's so unfair." Like no one says anything about Gosha. He's his 13-year-old boys. If like you know someone used like a 13-year-old girl at a show, everyone would go crazy. And it's like it's so different. Firstly, it's helped by the fact that menswear is so much cheaper, which does mean that physically young males can buy this. Like if you're a young female, like you can't fucking buy anything that's shown at Fashion Week because women's wear is so much more expensive.
Yeah, that's true.
But so the young teen that you're showing is never going to be anyone who engages with that brand or would wear it. Whereas like that's the 13-year-old, the one in the Fila jumper, like the white Fila jumper. Like that looks like what you'd see him in. I've never seen like a 15-year-old girl on the runway and be like, oh, she looks really effortless and like she's just got out of bed. Like you're like she's not, and it is the like. It's that difficult thing that, and it's where menswear is so much further ahead of women's wear, is that it is just like naturally much more authentic, I feel, than the women's wear. Like
also
I sit the women's wear and I'm like, who wears this
also
stuff?
it's kind of, you know, the way that you portray a model on the catwalk, you know, what is a message that you want like to send out, if there is a message. But you know, if you see like, for example, you know, you see that boy, you know, that is like 13-year-old and you know he's wearing just like a simple white long sleeve top and a pair of jeans that probably he would wear like when he's with his friends, you know. And if you see like, you know, a very young girl, you know, full on makeup with, you know, sexy clothes, you know, you start like thinking about, you know, okay, where is
and you think about it's the issue of control, isn't it?
That's like of moment. But
I'm really conscious of time, so I'm going to move us away from Gosha because I know we talked about it the whole time, and I'm conscious we haven't talked about a lot that happened in Milan. We haven't talked about Versace. Don't make models dance. That's just one thing I'd say from that show. It's so awkward, but I really like the Versace collection. I think it's interesting what Versace are doing. I feel like they're getting much more like back in kind of the tune of the moment, but it also feels more them. But there's lots of other people we haven't spoken about. I'm speaking about Jill Sander, Dominic.
The Jill Sander was great.
Yeah. What did you think of Versace? Did you go? Did you like
Yes,
it?
I did go. I thought, you know what, the thing that I would sometimes think about before I go, I think I've been to Milan's shows now for about 5 years. And I have a very set idea in my head of what I think Milan's going to be like, which is lots and lots of beautiful suits.
Yeah.
I think what we saw this time in Milan, for really the first time, was a lot of the shows getting back into how men actually dress and how things are changing for men's dress codes. And I think Versace was kind of the poster child show for that.
Yeah, that's
like, sure, there was tailoring in it, but it was very like, there was a lot of athletic wear, there was a lot of stuff that was very practical and technical, and it was all mixed together. Yeah. Like, you felt that this was a collection
it's
where...
like a commuter collection, you know?
Well, exactly, like, I'm going to the gym, then I'm going to the office.
Yeah.
But it felt like it very much reflected this feeling that men don't have dress codes really anymore. It's dressing smartly, but smartly isn't putting on a suit and tie anymore. It might be occasionally, but
it's not always.
But the first person who actually brought it to like Milan was Stefano Pilati, who started all this. He
With
really
Xenia,
was the first one. Like, okay, Italy is not just a suit and tie anymore. It's like mixing up with like, I don't know, like with a raincoat or like. Because it's like all this casual kind of wear, but I was really kind of shocked and sad that he left Zegna.
Yeah, I was really sad as well. I love what he did there. I think it was amazing.
It was like a really nice.
I don't think I ever actually met anyone who didn't like Stefano Pilati at Xenia. Like, it was this weird thing where at the end of Milan you'd always say what shoes do you like, and all the journalists would be like, oh, Prada, blah, 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 and then everyone would go, and obviously Xenia, and it just became so quickly like.
It's crazy how he somehow within 3 years. He really captured less than that, right?
I think it was less than that.
Like, I mean, I have friends who are like in banking and stuff.
Yeah.
You know? It's funny because they started wearing Zegna, but they're not fashionable people, you know.
Yeah,
but they started wearing Zegna because of that.
Yeah, that's
because
interesting.
it was like, because you know, like they're not gonna be wearing top man because like, it's skinny fit, but or something. But they would say like, but Zegna became much more like youthful.
Yeah. I think it was that slouchiness that he brought to it.
Yeah.
I'm so hot that I'm going to wrap things up quite shortly. But was it a strong Milan, do we think? Or it's weird because we talked about it being, like, you're all kind of saying... It's weird because I felt like there were strong individual shows, but as a season... But I don't think that was just Milan. It was like a whole season. It
big
felt
product
really...
Milan.
It just felt like it was so weird. Like, did you not feel like this? It's just like, what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know where I necessarily sit on this. I thought it was a bit of a weird Milan because, as I said, there was so much flux in what people were doing. And I also felt it was a weird Milan because I think because we've got either brands that don't have a creative head at the moment, especially Milan, or brands that have got a new creative head.
Yeah.
It was very hard to kind of spot trends. Most of the shows that people got excited about were ones that either had incredibly broad trends, like adventure, which was what made sort of
more themes than
Versace and Prada interesting, or you had sort of new designers who are still stamping their own personality on a house.
Yeah.
So trends were kind of hard to pin down. So from that, as a journalist, that was interesting because I suddenly had to really think about, like, what are they going to be wearing next season? Like, it's not just about pink or something. It's like there are bigger themes that I'm going to have to translate for people, you know, who read GQ. But I don't think it was a unstrong week. An unstrong fashion week at all. I think there were some very interesting shows in it, and certainly things like Prada, which actually really surprised me for all
I also
the right
thought
reasons.
Fendi was strong. Actually, we haven't talked about Fendi, but
Actually,
I thought that
that's
was
true. Yeah,
Fendi,
Fendi was good.
It was really nice. It did feel like there were some like high moments for individual houses and individual designers, but as a week, it is just such a, like, you talk about not being able to pin down themes and stuff, and I think that is because everything is in so much flux. It's just like, you know, how can you have a coherent conversation when no one quite knows what they're talking about or debating about? I'm interested where it goes, though.
I think, but now this might all be linked in the fact that now so many more shows are going so seasonless. I mean, you saw that at Fendi as well, because you had like a show that was ostensibly themed around a pool, but then you had guys walking down in fur coats by the pool, because, you know, so that's tricky. But I
really wanted someone to fall in the pool.
But you only have,
but you're not getting as many things like, you know, it's winter, so we're going to see what sort of coats are coming in. Like that is kind of edging away. Like, so I don't know. Maybe in time, shows will actually get a bit smaller with their like fewer looks and more concentrated into what they're trying to say.
I think it's going to become more a statement about that house and that brand, and much less a statement of like, this is what you should be wearing right now. Like in that sense, it'd be more like an advertising campaign. I don't know. It's interesting. What do we hope will happen? Just like,
I hope I'm still invited.
That's nice. Maybe that's a nice note to end on. I hope we'll be there next season.
Hope for world peace, that's what.
Yeah,
it's been this, I don't know, this
oh my
month.
god, don't. Like, I got so depressed in Paris that like a journalist the other day actually emailed me and was like, are you okay? He was like, the last time I saw you was like at the
the Brexit happened.
And you looked like you were going to kill yourself.
That morning, sitting in amongst all the international press at Fashion Week in Paris, was one of the weirdest experiences I've
after
ever
it got
had.
announced was the Junior Watanabe show, and like, you never feel cool at a Junior show because Junior's like amazing and fabulous and it's so great, and I like turned up and I was like so embarrassed to be British. Like, I was like I kept telling people, I was like, I like, it wasn't me, like most of my friends don't think like that, you know, and you're like, oh god.
But it was a bit like going to a party and you know that you've kind of done something and everyone's talking about it,
exactly.
but you're obviously not really in on the joke, and you're a bit like,
oh god, it was awful.
I was adopted by one of the people from GQ France as well. Jacqueline, the fashion director, like adopted me for the day. It's okay, we still love you.
I got a free glass of wine, like, just a random bistro, because the guy was obviously like, poor her, she's fucked. So, like, be nice. It's so depressing. And on that note, shall we give all the designers a round of applause for giving us so much to talk about?